Many thanks for staying with us. And Kenyans now have to dig deeper into their pockets and feel every pinch after the price of super petrol hit 113 shillings a litre as new pump prices take effect. The 1 shilling and 53 cents rise is expected to see the cost of living shoot up as Kenyans buckle up to pay more for transport and basic goods. Although diesel and kerosene prices dropped by a small margin, hard times linger as the government prepares to place a 16% value-added tax on fuel products from September, which will push many to the edge. KTN's Abia Gina has more.
It comes as no surprise to millions of Kenyans as fuel prices shot up yet again following the monthly price review by the Energy Regulatory Commission.
Bei ya mafuta ikipanda, transport itapanda. Unaona? Na transport ikipanda, raia hawatapata ile pesa, waongeze kwa ile pesa imeongezwa kwa transport.
Sisi pia itabidi tupandishe bei ya kubeba watu. Sasa tunaona bei ya mafuta kama ni mzuri ingerudi chini kidogo lakini.
According to ERC, the jump in fuel prices is attributed to an increase in the cost of landed fuel, which went up by 3% in the month of July, as well as an increase in the cost of imported crude oil, which hit $76 per barrel. A litre of super petrol went up by 1 shilling and 53 cents and will now retail at 113 shillings and 73 cents, whereas diesel will go down by 51 cents and will now retail at 102 shillings and 74 cents per litre in Nairobi. The latest reviews saw a drop in kerosene prices, which dropped by 78 cents and will now retail at 84 shillings and 95 cents per litre, offering a temporary reprieve for many households.
Saizi tena wanataka ili wanakenya wa kawaida wasahau hii mambo ya sukari ili watuongezee mambo ya hii pesa ya mafuta, na mimi naona naye mwananchi wa kawaida naye watakuwa na shida sana.
Other factors that have triggered a spike in fuel prices is the prevailing exchange rate, where the shilling is now trading at 100 shillings and 60 cents, exposing Kenya to external shocks. Despite the surge in pump prices for the last few months, Kenyans could just be bracing for harsher times ahead, especially if the government goes ahead to impose a 16% tax on petroleum products. Currently, Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, in his budget statement, announced a proposal that is set to see consumers pay an additional value-added tax of 16% beginning September this year. If this proposal sails through, motorists are set to pay a record 130 shillings and 15 cents per litre of petrol, or about 17 shillings and 9 cents more, beginning next month. Abia Gina, KTN News.
Right, and that is the focus of our discussion on News Center this morning, just taking a look at that fuel prices set to be going higher next month, and how that will affect the cost of living for millions of Kenyans. And joining me to have this conversation in studio is Ken Rishinga, who is an economist. Many thanks for joining us this morning, Ken. And
thank you for having me, Sharon.
Right. Of course, it's very tough already, the economic times in the country. And now the government planning to increase the 16%, to introduce the 16% VAT. How will this affect the cost of fuel and the cost of living in general?
Thank you, and good morning. In my many years as an economist, few things touch on the lives of Kenyans as fuel prices, and few things are as emotional to the lives of Kenyans as the cost of fuel, because fuel impacts food, fuel impacts transport, it really impacts almost every facet of the Kenyan life. In that previous interview, you've seen taxi drivers complaining that they might not be able to meet their daily demands if the continued rise of fuel continues in that direction. So in my assessment, when the government is planning to increase taxes, it really needs to focus on areas where it doesn't touch the common mwananchi in a very, very direct way. And this is not one of the ways, because what this is going to happen right now is going to introduce a much more difficult cost of life for a lot more, especially Kenyans who are at the bottom of the pyramid, people who depend on kerosene, people who depend on diesel to even cook food, kerosene. So I think that's one of the things. But
kerosene and diesel, the prices will be going a bit down.
They'll be going a bit down, but even if you look at the trends over the last few years, even if you look at the IMF proposals, they have really tried to make sure that all fuels are taxed. It's only Parliament that has really tried to protect the Kenyans from these increases in the fuel. So what we have right now is only petrol, which is going to be levied on the VAT, but the widespread feeling among IMF was all kinds of fuel should be increased so that the government can collect more revenue so that it can service the loans that it's been receiving from this international community.
And you've touched on it in just a bit. Can Parliament influence these proposals?
Yes, it can. So we have two levels of Parliament. We have the Senate, and the Senate has the Energy Committee, and they have raised a lot of complaints about what's happening. Then you also have the National Assembly that have historically been opposed to what some of the IMF proposals to Kenya have been, particularly on raising taxes. But really it's the Treasury at the end of the day that drafts the budget. I mean, the National Assembly has to pass on the budget through a vote, but really the buck stops at the Treasury, and it's really the place we really have to hope that they can try and empathize with the life of the common Kenyan.
And what have been the trends over the years on the cost of fuel?
It's been a very difficult conversation because there are three parts to it. We have the international fuel prices, which have steadily been increasing. Then we have local taxes in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. These countries have high debt. So to be able to service this high debt, they levy higher taxes to be able to service. So you find the cost of fuel, there's a local component that makes it so much more expensive than in other parts of the Western world, for example. So we really have to think about one of the things that Kenyans have consistently asked is, can Kenya be able to be self-sufficient? Do we have to import as much as we do? We have local manufacturing, local options. Like right now we have oil in Turkana. Can we find a local manufacturing solution so we can start producing fuel domestically for the local economy? And that will be so much more cheaper for the country, but so many other issues that make it a lot more complicated than it is. But really, we really have to ask those harder questions. Why should this oil in Turkana be exported to the international community? Then we buy it back, processed at a much higher rate. And you really see it in many oil-producing countries. You go to Nigeria, it's an oil-producing country, but you'll find there's always a fuel shortage, and fuel is very expensive. So this is not even a Kenyan problem. It's an African problem. Can we be able to process our own fuel locally? And can we also explore other forms of energy, renewable energy? We have solar energy, we have wind energy. The other day we saw a young man who came up with a vehicle up in Uasin Gishu. That was a solar vehicle. It might have seemed very basic, but that is innovation right there. If that young man was supported to create bigger and better cars that fully dependent on solar power, then we would not really need to import as much fuel as we do. Of course,
so we need to be more innovative as well as a country.
Actually, at the end of the day, innovation is a game changer that this country needs today and will forever need it. And more leisure. You might have to maybe go out less. You might have to have less money for your entertainment, for your weekends, because that money has to go to fueling your car. So you'll find other sectors that are called periphery sectors. People might start cutting back on those.
This has been globally easing. So going forward, what kind of perspective can legislators assume?
Well, a few months ago, the president signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is really to support movement of goods and services across Africa, to open the Pan-African market. Because I think for the longest time, Africa has really been dependent on Europe and importation from Europe. If we can support local processing, not just in Kenya, but in Rwanda, in Tanzania, across Africa, then the cost of living for many African countries will come much low. which means we'll need fewer loans, and we will be able to levy fewer taxes to be able to try and meet that.
All right. Many thanks, Ken Gishinga, who is an economist, giving us perspectives how Kenyans can shield themselves from the image